"I'm not worth much, sir, but I can cook," the homeless Apache woman told the lone rancher. The evening settled over the town like a warm dust gold blanket, the kind that softened noise and deepened shadows, and in that fading light Caleb Hawthorne walked with a steady, lonely posture of a man who belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. Horses clattered down Main Street, shopkeepers shouted their last calls, and children chased each other beneath porch lanterns. Yet he felt the hush of distance ringing inside him. Folks nodded at him out of habit. He was the kind of rancher a town respected, the kind who lent tools without asking them back, but none lingered long enough to know the truth of him. It had been years since anyone had asked what he dreamed of when the nights grew long. And as he passed the bakery, the scent of warm bread drifted toward him, stirring something tender, right before a soft, almost startled sob slipped from the narrow alley to his right, and he paused, uncertain if it was meant for him. He stepped closer, boots scuffing over gravel. In the dimness sat a woman, small and curled near a stack of unused crates, her dark hair hanging in gentle disarray over her shoulders. She looked young, though hardship had sharpened the edges of her face. Her clothes were worn nearly through, and dust clung to her like an extra layer of skin. She lifted her head as he approached, eyes wide, wary, shimmering with the last remnants of dignity she was trying to hold upright. For a moment she simply watched him, breathing slow and shallow, as if waiting for the world to decide what it would take from her next. Then she reached for a small tin cup beside her, as though offering tribute. Caleb stopped short, struck by how quiet the air grew between them, as if she'd stolen the attention of the entire dusk. "I'm not worth much, sir, but I can cook," she whispered, clutching the cup as if it proved she belonged somewhere. Her voice trembled with both courage and defeat, and Caleb felt something inside him shift. Those words weren't a bargain. They were survival laid bare. He crouched gently, letting his hands rest open so she could see he carried no threat. The woman, Nayeli, he would learn soon, watched his every breath, her fear braided with a wary hope that unsettled him in the softest way. Why did she look at him, as though he might be the first man in months who wouldn't chase her away? Why did he care so quickly that she not be afraid? He spoke softly, telling her she didn't owe him anything. He even offered to buy her a meal from a bakery, though she shook her head quickly, shame flickering in her eyes, as if the idea of someone spending coin on her was a sin. Only when he insisted, with a warmth he didn't know he still carried, did she slowly nod. But when she stood, townsfolk on the street turned to stare. Whispers rose in tight, judgmental threads. "Apache girl by the bakery. Somebody feeding her? She looks wild. Man like Caleb should know better." Their voices weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. Shame can speak in whispers and still split the air like thunder. Nayeli lowered her gaze, shoulders curling inward, apology already forming on her lips. Caleb didn't know her, yet the sight of her shrinking in front of those watching eyes tightened something in his chest. He hated the way she braced for insults, as if used to them. He hated the way she flinched as though expecting him to step away and pretend he'd never stopped. Instead, he shifted closer, placing himself subtly between her and the crowd. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to stun her into stillness, as if she'd never been shielded by anyone in her life. His jaw set with a quiet resolve he didn't need to name. He told her he lived nearby, that she could eat in peace out of sight. She hesitated, eyes darting between him and the street, but something in his tone must have calmed her. When she finally nodded, relief flickered across her expression like the faintest candle flame. And, as they began walking, he sensed her trying to make her steps smaller, quieter, less noticeable, like someone taught long ago that her existence took up too much space. Caleb led her through the familiar edges of town toward his ranch. Even here, among neighbors, he had always felt like a guest passing through, never rooted. It struck him how strange it was to guide someone home with him, to share that lonely walk with another heartbeat. The idea unsettled him, but not in a way he disliked. The ranch wasn't isolated. Cattle hands lived in bunkhouses nearby, and a few families tended small gardens along the road. There was always noise, laughter, clanging tools, music drifting on weekend nights. Yet Caleb rarely participated. He was the man who helped mend fences but left early from gatherings, who spoke little and listened much. He wondered now if Nayeli sensed that loneliness in him the moment she looked up from behind those crates. He brought her to the outdoor kitchen shed, a simple wooden space where he often cooked during warm evenings. Nayeli paused in the doorway, fingers grazing the counter as though it were something precious. She looked around slowly, taking in the kettle, the flour sack, the hanging herbs, the soft light slipping through the slats. The wonder in her face stirred a quiet ache in him. She cooked with practiced movements, her hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. Caleb watched her work, noting the reverent way she handled even simple ingredients. She moved with a quiet grace, as though each motion meant something. When she finally served him a small bowl of cornbread mash, she kept her eyes down, bracing for critique. But he tasted it and smiled. A real smile. The first in longer than he wanted to admit. She looked up then, surprised, and something warm flickered between them. He passed her the bowl, so she could eat too. Their fingers brushed, only a moment, light as a feather, but she froze, eyes wide. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. The lantern beside them swayed in the breeze, casting a soft glow across her face, and Caleb wondered when the world had last been quiet enough for him to notice such a thing. Night deepened as she finished eating, her eyelids growing heavy. But she fought sleep, as though rest was a luxury she'd stolen rather than earned. When her head finally dipped, he reached for a blanket and draped it gently around her shoulders. She startled, then softened, looking at him with a gratitude that pierced deeply, quiet, fragile, honest. The next day, she stayed near the shed, offering help wherever she could. Caleb sensed her watching him from the corner of her eye, studying the way he spoke to ranch hands, how he treated even the animals with a gentle patience. He liked the way she hummed while grinding spices, how she bit her lip when she concentrated, how her laughter, small at first, grew a little more certain each hour she remained. He told himself this was simply kindness. But he felt something shifting beneath that reasoning, slow and warm. One afternoon, as he hauled a saddle onto a rail, a sudden harsh gust swept dust into the yard. Nayeli flinched, stumbling back with a startled gasp. Caleb dropped what he held and reached her in 2 strides, catching her by the waist before she fell. She steadied herself against him, fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt, chest rising fast. He didn't speak at first, just held her until her breath slowed. "You're safe," he murmured. Her cheeks flushed, and she nodded without stepping away. Something quiet and electric hummed in that closeness, lingering long after he finally let go. Every day afterward, their gestures grew softer, braver. Her hand brushing his while serving breakfast, his coat draped over her shoulders in the evening chill, her laughter joining his in moments that never lasted long enough. And always, curiosity curled through their silence. What were they becoming to one another? Town gossip grew, but Caleb no longer cared. He saw the way Nayeli straightened when she walked beside him, how her steps lost their hesitation. He saw the way light returned to her eyes, filling spaces that had once held only caution. And he felt something new in himself too, a quiet peace rising where loneliness had long lived. He wondered if this was what it felt like to finally return to a home he didn't know he'd been seeking. One night, on the porch warmed by lantern light, Caleb finally spoke the words that had been gathering for days. They weren't grand or rehearsed. They were simple, trembling, but true. He asked her to stay not just in his home, but in his life. Her breath caught, tears shining as she whispered yes, and he leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a slow, tender kiss that felt like a vow. Their marriage happened quietly a few days later, a small ceremony, a few uneasy stares, a handful of half-hearted congratulations. Yet when Nayeli slipped her hand into Caleb's, the world felt steadier. She belonged somewhere, and he no longer stood alone among people. But as the sun dipped behind the hills that evening, shadows gathered near the outskirts of town. Whispers carried on the wind, angry voices, muttered threats about the Apache woman living like a white man's wife. Caleb didn't hear them at first. Nayeli did. Her spine stiffened, her fingers tightening around his arm. She turned toward the horizon where 3 horsemen lingered, watching the ranch with cold, measuring eyes. And though Caleb hadn't noticed yet, she knew their peace had been seen and envied and would soon be tested. The mornings at the ranch unfolded slowly, tenderly, as if the sun itself lingered to watch them. Nayeli and Caleb sat together on the porch, hands brushing, fingers intertwining, the small gestures of shared life weaving an invisible warmth around them. She tucked tiny wildflowers into his hair. He adjusted the folds of her dress with gentle care. Even the softest laugh between them felt like an entire day's worth of sunlight. Every touch, every look, grounded them in a world they were finally building together. Caleb felt, for the first time, a quiet peace in the midst of people. Yet a question hovered in the corners of his mind. Could this fragile happiness endure? That evening, under the open sky, they lay together in silence. Nayeli rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Caleb's hands enclosed hers, and a quiet vow seemed to pass between them, unspoken yet complete. The wind carried the mingled scent of dust and late summer blossoms, the kind that makes the world feel both wild and intimate. Nayeli whispered, "We might face danger, but I know you'll be with me." He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, pressed his lips gently to her forehead, and murmured, "Always." And yet, faint hoofbeats sounded from the distance, slicing the quiet like an uninvited warning. Days passed, and the shadow they had felt grew more tangible. The hostile riders had returned, their intent cold and unmistakable. The peaceful rhythm of cooking, tending animals, and soft laughter was replaced by tension. As each movement was watched, each step measured. Caleb placed himself between Nayeli and any perceived threat, but she gripped his arm and whispered fiercely, "I won't stay behind without you." Her courage, small yet radiant, lit a fire in him that matched his own resolve. In that moment, love became both armor and weapon, a shield that no judgment or malice could pierce. Night fell, heavy and still, as the riders approached the ranch. Caleb positioned himself in front of Nayeli, ready for confrontation, but she planted her hand firmly on his arm. "I'm not leaving you," she said, eyes steady in the lantern glow. His chest surged with admiration and protectiveness. The air was thick with threat, yet even in that oppressive tension, the connection between them hummed like a sacred chord. The riders demanded, "Hand over your wife or suffer the consequences." Caleb stepped forward, jaw tight, voice unwavering. "She is my wife. You will not touch her. I will die first." The night erupted in sudden violence. A gunshot split the air. Caleb's arm took the graze meant for Nayeli, and she screamed his name, running to shield him with her own body. Time slowed. Every heartbeat, every breath became a declaration. They would not break. The riders froze, stunned by the couple's bravery and the raw, unflinching bond they bore. Nayeli's calm, yet unyielding words reached even the hardest of their hearts, speaking of love, belonging, and the dignity owed to every human being. One by one, the guns lowered. The riders, ashamed and disarmed by the courage they could not overcome, turned and vanished into the night. Dawn spilled golden across the ranch. Caleb stirred in bed, shoulder bandaged, while Nayeli sat beside him, gently brushing his hair from his face. Her voice, trembling with love, whispered, "I love you." He smiled weakly, pulling her close, and their lips met in a slow, lingering kiss, soaked with gratitude and relief. The air between them seemed lighter now, cleansed by the night's trials. For the first time, they both felt entirely present, entirely safe, entirely seen. Soon, neighbors arrived cautiously, bearing food and apologies, their previous judgment softened by the courage they had witnessed. Nayeli felt warmth and acceptance in ways she had never imagined. Caleb felt the same, surrounded by people, yet truly understood only by the woman at his side. Love had not only survived the night, it had transformed the world around them, softening the harshest hearts. And in the quiet reflection that followed, the story's voice speaks to the listener, the viewer, the reader. It reminds that even among crowds, loneliness can cling like dust, and sometimes it takes a single brave soul to make a man, or a woman, feel at home. Love is never always loud. It is built in quiet acts of devotion, shared burdens, and the choice to stand together against all odds. Caleb and Nayeli walk hand in hand through the golden haze of morning light, a testament that love, when nurtured and defended with tenderness, can change even the hardest hearts. And if ever you feel alone among your own people, remember their story, and keep your heart open for the stranger destined to become your home.